Scotty Alexander, how the hell are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Ken Tucker?
Hey, so we've been having conversations, and I think that there are things that have gone on in both of our lives that kind of make us out to who we are today. We've had wonderful conversations about so many different topics, but I think that today would be fun just for you and I to get together and talk about where we are, how we got here. I think we've talked a lot about, changing our lenses to get different outcomes. So we can discuss, those kind of lenses. And I think maybe today's conversation can morph into, putting on the leadership lens. Do you want to talk a little bit about you and let people hear just your background a little bit?
Sure. So, as you know, I've kind of got a three-part career. I'm a psychologist by education. Did my undergraduate work at JMU, my graduate work at Boston College. Spent 25 years in COO and CEO roles doing leadership officially. And spent 30 years teaching martial arts, where, the whole goal is to perfect the character of your students. And so, I wrote a book about 10 years ago, and I've been working as a leadership consultant, a business consultant, executive coach, trying to figure out, to your point of taking on the leadership lens of how do we look at solving complex business problems through a leadership lens. And my experience has taught me that, the problems a lot of times are created by the leaders, and the solution a lot of times comes down to how the leaders conduct themselves. So I don't know, do you have any thoughts on, you got something going on in your business right now that we could kind of talk about?
Well, I'm going to start with kind of laughing because now I know why we get along so well, because I'm a college dropout. And I have my story to get to this place is a lot different from your story.
Absolutely. And yet here we sit, right? Isn't it about the people? It's not about, I've said this a million times, you and I could sit here and we could pick a business and we could create a business plan. We're smart enough, we're capable enough. We've done this enough times. We could open up a bowling alley, we could create the spreadsheet, and we could show, how many people we need to hire and who's going to work what hours. And we could pull up an amortization schedule, figure out how much we need to borrow, what's going to take to retire that debt. And once we figure out the business plan, execute it, we go out, we hire 50 people to work in this place, and then we can throw that business plan the hell out the window, because, some of those people are not even going to show up the first day, as we know in the current environment. Some are going to like each other, some are going to hate each other, some are going to sleep with each other and then hate each other. And how we manage those people is really going to determine our success, not the quality of our spreadsheet.
Absolutely. And I think the two of us, where it really fits in terms of conversations for others to be able to hear it and maybe get something out of it, is we've both gotten to the same place, going two completely different paths.
Different paths.
And I think everybody, that's out there for everybody, but it's just too many people maybe don't know that they don't acknowledge that they're on a path, or
yes,
they don't know where they're trying to get. So they just kind of, flap around. And that was me when I was back in my 20s. I always,
that was all of us.
Yeah. I always thought I'd be successful, and I always thought all those things were going on, but I never knew how. And it doesn't happen just because, and you and I have talked about it. I had, I think I was 24 or so. I got a job review, and my boss, lover, told me Ken Tucker will never amount to anything more than an accounting clerk. So that was my first kind of kick in the pants that upset me. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have to, F you, who are you to tell me? And yeah, as an old guy today, looking back over my career, she was absolutely correct. That's all I ever showed her. Right. Yeah. So I think it's fascinating, though, that as long as you're driven, as long as you know where you're trying to get, those, I think being goal oriented is huge. Not necessarily, concerning leadership, where we're kind of talking today, but I think by setting goals, and, whenever I've had a goal out in front of myself, I attain it. If I'm just getting through something without a place that I'm trying to get, I just kind of am. right? But
Yeah.
it's whatever. So we can, maybe that will be a future one or whatever. But so for everybody out there, so for a little bit about me, I own an air conditioning and heating company, Tucker's Air Conditioning and Heating. We started with my brothers, my business partner. We started in a garage. I've been in business 27 years, and it took us 20 years, 22 years to really figure out and understand leadership and what you do. It's, the thought process is, as a leader, you can just work hard and others will follow. And those people that work hard, you promote into key roles. And then those people go into those key roles and they want the same things that you want. And they're driven to the same level, the same places you're trying to go. And it kind of
and that didn't work, did it?
No, it just doesn't. For some reason, it doesn't work that way. So as you kind of go through it, we built a nice life for my brother and I, but the reality is we were employed by our own businesses we were trying to create, but we were always just employees of the business. So that's where sitting down with you and having these conversations.
You hit a glass ceiling at some point where you can only work so many hours in a day, and at some point in your developmental cycle, you hit a place where you kind of got to a certain level, and then you have a few key employees leave, and then it took you a while to build back up there, and you got stuck in that cycle at a higher level, like you said. I mean, you were making good money, you had a good lifestyle, but you can only sustain it with heroic effort rather than by design.
Absolutely, because then when you did it the way that we did it, as you grew, every decision you made just put more onus on you to do more.
Yeah.
You didn't have the people around you that were taking loads off. So
self-motivated.
So if we decided, so we're heating and cooling, and we decided to add plumbing. When you decide to add plumbing, all you're doing is you're just creating more work for my brother and I. We didn't have, so we did it wrong, right? I
don't know you did it wrong, but you certainly learned some lessons along the way, right? I mean,
absolutely.
In what I do, it's fascinating working with people like you, where you realize that. I'll give you an easy example. I call it the Gauntlet. When I had 80 people working for me and companies that I've worked with, you walk in the morning and you walk past the first office and you go, "Hey, how's it going? How's your weekend?" And man, my kid won the championship at the soccer league, and we're excited and life is good and there's energy. And you go, "Oh, great. We'll have a happy Monday." And you walk to the next door and you go, "Hey, how's your weekend?" Like, "Oh, my dog died." And you have to be sad with that person for a few minutes. And you do this past 10, 12, 15 doors till you get to your office. And when you get to your office, you're exhausted, right?
Yeah.
Those 5 to 8 minutes you spend with each of those key employees is the most important thing you can do with your time. And the lens, the mental shift is that doing that is actually the most important thing I can do as a leader, so that those people do what it is, feel connected to me, and go, "Okay, I can let me put that back in the box and get to work." And most of us walk through that gauntlet. Now it takes us 45 minutes to get to our office because of how crazy it is, and we're like, "God, I just wasted 45 minutes."
Right.
And that's our mental thought. And the reality is, if it needed to take you an hour or an hour and a half, take the hour and a half. You're building people, and building people is what unlocks them to let them sustain your company. And that has to be an intentional effort on your part as the leader. And it's not in passing. It's not just salary.
Yeah, I think when you create an environment where you're you're the owner that's trying to drag people with you because it's my dreams, it's my goals. I've had to, you have people in the wrong seats. Well, all of a sudden they're just employees, and their expectation is I'm dragging them with me. So when you hit 5 million in revenue, but you only have 2.5% net profit at the end of the year, there's no money left over. So you're 5 million, you only made a couple $100,000. You can't.
And all they see is the 5 million.
The 5 million, and it's you just did an install for 8 or 9 grand. There's just the money's flowing, and but then you take on more and more and more, and it just creates this turbulence around you that you can't succeed it, right? And it was probably so we were just 5 million probably 2.5 years ago. And,
Yeah.
now we've hit 10, and our expectation this year is 13, not goal, expectation. So I expect to grow 30% this year with a goal of 15, with an expectation of 20 million in 2 years from today, with a goal of 30, 3 years from today.
Yeah.
So, but now, how do you do that? How did I go from the 5 to 10? It was these conversations, and it was a change in my mindset. As a leader, maybe you're thinking of, you get to a spot and it's all about being in charge, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is, it's not about being in charge. It's taking care of those in your charge. And there is a difference, right?
Huge difference.
Oh, and it's when you start thinking of the world through that lens, that's that leadership lens that you have to change. I changed my lens, and then the business succeeded. I'm working with this local program with underprivileged kids, and the mentors were working on a topic of when have you felt powerful, and when have you felt, basically not powerful. What made you feel powerful? What have you done in your life that made you feel powerful? And when in your life have you not felt powerful? It made you feel unpowerful, whatever you want to call it.
Whatever you want to call it.
And as you're kind of talking through it and you're doing it, what you ended up finding is I'm listening. And of course, the kids felt powerful when they used a sports analogy, because you're really talking, third graders through seniors in high school. And as you're kind of going through that, at one point, one of the mentors was making an example about, these guys are sitting back in their seat, and she kind of leaned to me and says, Mr. Tucker, if you had an employee that you had a meeting and they were looking like that, how would you feel? And I used an example of, we had a meeting, and one of my warehouse guys was doing just that. And when the meeting was over, he was kind of laughing and joking. So I had to meet with him afterwards, but I went to my brother and I was like, this guy's not going to work out. And it was the perception of what the perceived value that he did. So my question to these kids was, in that moment, was I powerful, or was that, in a situation where I was powerless, right? Was I powerful, or was I powerless? And of course, all the kids are like, well, you were powerful because you were in charge and you got to fire him, or you could do whatever. And I said, what's interesting is that was one of those moments as an owner that I actually felt powerless. Right. That's a guy that I had different expectations for. I should have been able to lead that individual down to a different outcome, as opposed to, firing somebody isn't powerful. Firing somebody means I failed.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a funny thing that, where we started this conversation about the problems often stem from leadership and the solutions rest in leadership. In many ways, you failed. You failed to, like you say, lead and get to a place where somebody who could be a star employee felt like that was okay.
Yep.
So who failed, him or you? Well, I would offer it was you, because 100%. if you had the culture that pushed them in that direction, and you had the conversations, and you took the time running that gauntlet, or on a weekly meeting or a bi-weekly meeting where you sat down and said, listen, dude, you're a leader around here. People kind of take their cue from you. So it's really important that, when we're doing meetings, it's not that I want you to toe the line. I just want you to be enthusiastic and energetic, and I want you to be invested and challenge them to look at it as an opportunity to grow their resources for their family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you could look at it like, the reason he's acting like that, he's responsible for his behavior. Don't get me wrong on that one. But from a leadership perspective, you failed.
100%.
And the fix is for you to, so we'll fire him and we'll bring in the next guy. And if we don't change our culture, eventually that guy will be leaning back in the chair and goofing off too. Yep. Right? Who's responsible? Well, you are. It's your company.
Absolutely. And what's crazy about leadership is so many people, I've had the wrong people in my management seats, right? I had the wrong guy in my service manager seat. But the reality was, he was the wrong guy for that role. He was the right guy for employment
for your
within
company.
my organization. I just had him in the wrong place, right? So I was like everybody else in the trades. kind of being, growing on the school of, the streets or the school of hard knocks, if you will. So I am kind of self-taught on just about everything that I do. As you kind of go through that, you have your own ways of looking at it. Well, I had that guy who was the perfect service mechanic. He was a perfect service tech. I had a service manager that decided to move on. And as he moved on, it was next man up. That's like the sports, right? It's your next man up. Well, he was great at what he did. So I figured he'd be great at somebody else. And the reality is I never taught him how to be a leader. He didn't want us to be 10 or 20 million dollars. That wasn't what his driver was. He was comfortable with his income and it didn't make him a bad guy. Again, that's my failure.
And if he's, and that's that right person, wrong seat mentality is a great mentality, because, just because you're a superstar, well, let's go sports analogy.
Yep.
Michael Jordan is not a great coach. Boy, you want to put the ball in his hands in the last few seconds, but you don't want him coaching the team in those last few seconds. Right. Completely different skill set.
Yep.
Right. Completely different mental makeup to get the best out of another person versus be the best. And I think we do it all the time. Exactly what you're saying. I can be a great installer. I can be really good at being self-motivated, on time. You look at all the things that matter for being a great installer. And then you put them in an office and go, hey, so now you got 7 people who are your direct reports. I want you to make them the best human beings you can make them. What is it about installing HVAC systems that's going to prepare me to do that for these 7 people?
Absolutely.
Nothing.
Yeah. Right? What was interesting about like that scenario, if you look back at it, all the things were right in front of me to see, but I didn't see it again because I wasn't wearing the right lens.
Right?
Yep. So as you're kind of going through it, it was all of a sudden, you hire, younger techs who were maintenance techs, and they need to be taught and trained to become demand techs. Well, the fact of the matter is this guy was a really good demand tech. He didn't want to spend the time or the energy to teach somebody else how to be him, because he just expected them all to have it.
Right. Right.
And there was no remembrance of this is what it took me. I was that way one day too. Well, now I'm here. So it was, again, wasn't, good individual. He still should be working here. There are roles here for him, but because of what I did and I forced it down a level, when he ends up leaving, it was in a way that we're both unhappy. Right.
Yeah.
But that's a top down leadership thing that was 100% on me, and I think too many business owners or businesses get too caught up in that was just the wrong guy. He failed. And they don't really know well enough to look at it from a constructive, criticism perspective.
Right. We put on that personal relationship hat or the family hat or lens, if you want to talk at it that way. And we look at it through this lens of, hell, there's people that do what I do, that's, use the family as a motif. We're a family here at this company. No, you're not a family. You don't fire your family. You can walk away from your business. And in fact, you look at the culture today, one of the best ways to get ahead is to quit your job and go somewhere else. You can probably get a $20,000 raise because people are dying for good employees.
Yeah.
It's one of the challenges in a leadership position as a business owner. But if you put on that lens and then you look at it and you go, oh, well, that guy's not pulling his weight. That guy's not following his job description. That guy. Right. And when you put on a leadership lens and you go, boy, what have I done to create this? Whether it's something I did or something I didn't do, but yes, again, there's that, I'm splitting hairs a little bit, but that person is responsible for their behavior and their choices. You, as a business owner, are responsible for the culture that you create, the people that you hire, how you onboard them, how you ask them to interact. What are the behaviors that you ignore instead of addressing that then they feel like they can get away with? What are the things that you pay attention to? What are the things you don't pay attention to? Well, that's all on you, and we're training these people because and I know you've heard me say this so many times. It's a false economy, right? Work's a token economy. and yes, we want to get along with people. We want to respect them. We want to treat them well. We want to develop them as human beings. But ultimately, unlike your friends, unlike you and I or your favorite golf group, if you remove the paycheck, the people stop coming to work.
Right.
They're not there for free.
Nope.
They are there, and it's a token economy. When you really think about it, you pay them a certain amount of money, and in exchange, they will give you a certain amount of effort and time. And so that makes it artificial. And so the rules are different. So if you look at it through the lens of human interaction and relationship, well, you can't, because the core underpinning of a human relationship is you and I are hanging out in a bar. We're both there by choice. Either one of us can get up and walk away. Neither one of us is more important than the other one. Neither one of us is a boss and an employee. Neither one of us is paying the other to be there. Well, now we're equals. It can never be that way in a token economy.
So why don't we take a minute, and
Sure.
if you could, with your background, and you can use the education however you want to play it out. When we're talking lenses, so if somebody happens to be watching that, and it seems so simple, take these glasses off and put that leadership lens back on. It's not that simple. Right. So can you define when we're talking lenses or whatever in your background, define what that means if somebody says, hey, you gotta put on a different lens?
Yeah, sure. So let me see if I can think of some easy examples. So, when your kids were younger and you went home and you walked in the front door, you took off the business owner lens, you took off the leadership lens, and you put on the dad lens, right? When you coached your kids in basketball and you left the house and you drove them to basketball, you took off your dad lens and you put on your basketball coach lens. And it's one of those things that's hard for parents to teach their kids, is that there are these different roles that you play as you go through life. When you leave work you're in the morning rotary. When you show up early for the morning rotary, you put on your rotary lens, and your behavior and the way you see people changes. I'll give you an easy example. I've had people that I've asked for references, and they're like, "Oh yeah, they're in rotary with me. They're a good guy." And then I meet them in business, and I'm like, "Man, they're not a very good business person, or they're not a very reliable person." And instead of looking at it and saying, well, the person who gave me that reference, oh, they messed up, or, instead of looking at them, I go, oh, okay, well, they were looking at them through their rotary lens. And aren't we all very nice people when we put on our jacket and we go to rotary and we have a nice dinner and we listen to somebody talk and you have on your rotary lens. That's very different, right?
But if we're then discussing with something, and it's like, you got to put on that leadership lens, but you see, how do you then describe to that individual that might be looking at it the way that I was before, right?
That person's looking at it through the boss lens or the business owner lens.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And like you said, when you shifted that to say, okay, I am responsible for leading people.
I said taking care of those in our charge.
Taking care of those in your charge, not being in charge.
Yeah.
Leading people, I would call it. You put on the leadership lens. That looks like sometimes nurturing, sometimes confronting, but always having their best interest and build a better human being. That's your job, is to build a better human being. They know their job description. They know what they're there for. They know what they're compensated for. When you started taking care of the people in your charge, it looked very different than sitting down with the spreadsheet and talking about numbers and how we can grow the company. It meant talking about, how's things at home? You good? Are you making your payments? Do you need help? Is there some way, what's your big goal for the next year? And I want to buy a car. Great. You need help with budgeting? How do you feel about your budgeting? Are you good? And help them achieve their goals, and recognize that your company is helping them achieve their goals.
Yeah.
And that when they start to see that you are building a human being, suddenly all the shit gets done. Why is that?
Yeah.
Well, because you took responsibility to take care of those in your charge. It doesn't mean necessarily nurturing. It doesn't necessarily, it could mean confronting. It could mean holding them accountable. It could mean challenging them to be better than they were before. It's a really, it's almost like a paradoxical intervention that by not talking about the spreadsheet and the business plan, although that happens in another meeting, right? We do our annual meeting, our quarterly, whatever. We do our stand-up dailies, all the places where we're supposed to talk about the business. But in my meeting with that person, I'm there to make them a better person. And fascinatingly, if that's a word, they do a better job as a result. And like you said, however you want to word that. So the lens that you look at it through is, going back to that, if I'm looking at it through the business owner's lens, then I'm looking at my strategic plan and where we are according to budget. If I'm looking at it through my accountant's lens, I'm looking at whether or not everything's accounted for and whether the filing system allows me to get to the backup documentation correctly for where I put the buckets, the money in the buckets. If I'm looking at it through my employee lens, then am I being treated fairly? Am I making enough money for the amount of work I'm putting in? If you look at it through the leadership lens, then the buck stops with you.
Right.
And you stop looking at other people and you stop looking at, the money. And I think this is where, okay, so there's a good example. As a business owner, you have to do your leadership lens when you're dealing with your people. You have to take that lens off and put on your business owner lens when you start looking at our cash situation to make sure that we have enough operating reserves to get through the winter, because those are our slow months. That has nothing to do with people. That has to do with strategically managing your money.
Right.
And so if you leave on your leadership lens while you're looking at the money, you might be like, well, but that guy really needs some help, and you got to have the right lens on for the right situation.
Right. But what's interesting is, so as you're going there, though, how do you then? Because in my mind, when I was in business for 15 years, I thought I had the leadership lens on. I was just looking at it. I put on the wrong pair of glasses though. So yeah. How do you? I think when we're talking lenses, let's make sure that what we're also saying is, if something isn't working, change the lens and try to look at it a different way so you can find a different solution. Because again, we're all just trying to get to an outcome, right? And every business is different. So everybody, and this is where I love our conversations, because we could morph into a bunch of different directions, right? So I mean, you go to politics at this point, right? So conservatives look through this lens and liberals look through this lens. And the fact of the matter is everybody wants to get to the same outcome. We all believe in the same outcome, but we get there in two different places. So if we could just sort of switch lenses and understand, like in that environment, we wouldn't have the disconnect that we have in the country. But that's a whole nother separate thing. So
that's a future episode.
But
here's what I would say to you, and if I could, stick into business and even maybe simplify it a little bit, right? So I make the distinction between leadership and management. So not all managers are leaders. I have this debate back and forth with a lot of people. I do believe most leaders are decent managers. So for me, the distinction is, the lens is, if I'm looking at anything that's quantifiable, I'm looking at scheduling, I'm looking at timetables, I'm looking at where we stand according to budget, I'm looking at what are the tasks that are assigned today, what's on the project board, what's our project management, where are we on our Gantt chart for getting our stuff done. Anything quantifiable is management. We have to have that in business. Again, we're not here to make everybody feel good. We're actually here to provide a product to a customer, whatever that product is, in a way that is profitable. And when we switch from the what, so what do I have to get done today? Here's the list. Here's who's going to do what. Here's what time we're going to get it done. And I switch to the how. Now, how are we going to do that? all right, we're going to have these 3 meetings. Each of you he's going to pay who's going to be in those meetings. Now, how are we going to conduct those meetings? Who's going to talk? When you get to the qualitative stuff, now you're in the realm and the lens of leadership.
Right.
And so I can go and conduct a morning stand up with my giant whiteboard with all of the projects on there, where we stand, and point out where all the problems are. And I can do that like a jackass. And people walk out of that meeting, they've got the information, they're demotivated.
Yep.
I could stand up there and do it in a funny way, do a Robin Williams act. And they walk out and they're giggly and happy, and they still have the same information. It's a very different outcome. Now, which one works for your company? I don't know, right? I mean, you've got to find that as a leader, you're looking at it through the lens of how can I conduct this meeting in a way that maximizes the chances that the people feel good about doing the work, because the work's on the whiteboard. Which brings me to a really interesting Zen concept, since, we're not too far removed from the Super Bowl, right? So 1 million people watch the Super Bowl. The blue team does a bunch of stuff, and the red team does a bunch of stuff, and the little people in stripies throw some little yellow flags here and there. And at the end of the day, there's a score on the scoreboard. We all watch the same event, and half of those people walk out and they're happy and elated and energetic, and half of those people walk out and they're pissed off or despondent. Where'd the emotions come from? Because they watched the same event.
It's inside. It's those emotions.
It came from them. They created the most, but that's that leadership lens. When they look at it and say, well, I'm mad because that play, or that was a horrible play at the end, the ref, whatever. No, it wasn't the ref. You know where your feelings came from? Right here, right? Yeah. My lens has to be that I created those things. And I mean, we can take it one step further. We can be in a room full of, 10 of our best friends, and they all made a really cool dish, and we ate really good food, and we had a couple of beers, and ostensibly we should be happy, right? Because the people around us are the people I chose to be with. And I'm watching something on this square piece of glass, and my emotions, according to me, are relying on what's happening on that screen in a city to people that I don't even know.
In an outcome that we have no control over.
An outcome we have no control over, and yet I've given my emotions away.
Yeah, but I think that kind of plays back into then in business. I think it's one of the things that small companies make a mistake, and I think I made this mistake, is when you promote somebody to that title manager, we shouldn't be in a small organization. They shouldn't be managers, right? Because you're managing to outcomes. You really shouldn't be managing people, right? Because you don't have any control over those individuals and what their goals and where they're trying to get. So we call everybody managers. So you just went from a service tech to a service manager, or an installer to an install manager. So we give them that manager moniker. We kind of make them feel like they just made it, right? So now you've made it. You're a manager. So woohoo. Well, in reality, from my world, that means you're just getting started. Right. In their world, I just made it sometimes. Yeah. But I think when we name them a manager, again, we're not then giving them the tools to understand that we're now managing to an outcome. And that outcome has to do with, in my world, it has to do with comfort, or it has to do with the client. It has to do with that client experience. You're managing to that.
Right.
You aren't, when we say manager, now it's like, now that's why non-leaders that are in management roles, that's why they end up just micromanaging the individual. What time did you show up, and how long did it take you to get from here to there, and what was your lunch, and how long did you take lunch, and what was your
objective data,
what is your average ticket, and what is
well, whatever. Think about it even through the customer experience, like you said. I mean you manage tasks, you lead people. Right. So if I go out as an installer and I got my script, and I go over and I go, sir, Mr. Homeowner, I'm required to inform you that blah, 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 check. We did blah, 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 check, blah, 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 check. And I'm staring at the ground the whole time. But I did everything I was supposed to do. Look, boss, I did everything I do. And then they give you a 3-star rating, right? Why? because they weren't leading the conversation. They were managing their tasks.
Yeah. So I
And-
think that's why I think that moniker needs to change. Now, maybe in large corporations it's different, but I still would argue it's not. You know, again,
Yeah,
we give people a title that is a misnomer to what their actual role is.
Right.
And you know, so like you said, you're managing tasks, you're managing the outcomes, you're leading people. And
Right.
you know, so one of the things that we now do in our company is every manager is responsible for meetings. I meet with my managers. I know what their goals and aspirations are. I know where they're trying to get, and we set up a plan for them to go attain it. And I don't care what they are. And sometimes their goals might be business related, and sometimes their goals are family related, right? So,
Right.
you know, a great goal is you want to be able to afford college education for your kids, or you know, I want to be able to take 2 weeks of vacation, or whatever those goals are. I want to buy my first home. I don't care what the goals are, but I also think that we kind of set our employees up in the world. It used to be you take a job in the 70s, you took a job and that's where you stayed and you were there your whole life, or in
Forever,
the 60s and 50s, whatever. Well, anymore, now it's like everybody changes over every 2 or 3 years. And I think half the reason that that's happening is because business owners aren't in tune with what their employees are striving for and where they're trying to go so that they can help them get there. So if you work for me and I know where you're trying to get at the end of the year and I help you attain that, you probably are going to be relatively happy. And now you're going to want to talk to me about what are your goals next year. And
Right.
You know, I had an employee that sat back and he was getting frustrated about pay, and somebody else, I promoted somebody else to a role, and I didn't even look to him. And he love him because he came in and asked why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you give me a chance? And my response to him is you've been applying for that job for the last 2.5 years, and you showed me nothing that made me even think that you had interest in it, right? So again, my mistakes, because I needed to be talking to him 2.5 years ago and understand what is he trying to do. So from that, he went to as an individual that was, you know, making in the low 70s, and he was good, and he was worth so much more, but he wasn't doing what he had to do to earn it. Well, when he told me that he had a goal of he wanted to get 6 figures, he wanted to make 100 grand, we sat down and I laid out the groundwork that this is what needs to happen for you to be able to do this. This is what we as a company have to do. This is what you as an individual have to do. These are the areas that I think you can be growing in, you know. So, and a lot of that had to do with leadership. He was a demand service tech that is just great at what he does, but he wasn't taking that experience and helping the people that weren't as good as him, as an example. I got him to change that all over. And by the end of that year, 1 year later, he made 110. So when I sat down with him, of course, he's ecstatic, you know, but now his goal was like 135. So now, you know, okay, well, this is what, and now you have to have that same conversation, and I relish in that. And but that's, you know, that's if I was managing him, he wouldn't have ever gotten himself to that 110. I was managing the outcomes and I was leading him. I just led him down a road that he didn't even know he could get.
Right.
It's awesome.
That's awesome.
Oh, it's awesome. So where do you want to more? It looks like you're starting to get dark where you are. Where do you want
I was going to get up and turn my lights on here pretty soon. But actually I was thinking, so I mean, we're probably at the 40-45 minute mark. You want to, you know, you started this conversation. You want to kind of summarize where we went today?
I don't know where we went.
Well, leadership lens.
I know where I'm sitting in an office at a desk while you're sitting in a marina on a boat, and I'm a little jealous.
Life's the sum total of your choices.
I think to kind of tidy it all up, I think leadership can morph into a number of different directions. I think that if we all could just be a little bit self-critical and understand where our actual strengths and where our weaknesses are, and if we as individuals could really constantly work on those weaknesses can become strengths over time. Leadership was, I think I have a background of athletics, so I think I was sort of a natural leader that I got from having a father that ingrained that in me from an athletic perspective. That taught me a lot, but in reality, in business, sometimes, when I got into business, to me, it was, I'm a leader. Let's go. Let's all go because everybody wants what I want. Well, nah,
Yeah. That's
it is
cheerleading.
nowhere near that. So, I had to tweak that lens I was looking for, and I had to differentiate between what my goals and dreams were and then what somebody else's goals and dreams are. And I can take 65 employees and all those people with all those different goals and dreams, and that's how I'm going to create mine. But I had to
Right.
understand theirs. So, I had to kind of tweak that lens. And I kind of went within a lens conversation. I'll leave it with this. And you were at my dad's funeral, so but it was, he died 9 years ago now. It's crazy, but to me, from a parenting perspective, and I think I said it at the funeral, I just hope that my children see me through the same lens that I saw my dad. Well,
Right.
in business, it's very similar to that, right? I hope my employees can see my company through the same lens. I hope as they start transitioning over and taking over my company, and they start running this and they start doing what I'm doing, I hope they can see what's out there and the opportunities and the potential through the same lens that I'm seeing it. I hope I've ingrained that to them so that they can go get whatever they want to get. And I think, when you want more for others, I think at the end of the day, I think that's quantifies leadership.
Yeah. Agreed. So great topic today. I mean, I appreciate where you're coming from, and I hope that the idea of looking at it as a lens that you look through is helpful to people, right? Because it's not a mantle, it's not a set of training, it's not a set of skills, it's not a set of books that you read. It's all those things. And yet a lot of times it is as simple as taking off, that lens that you look at the world through and saying, okay, now let's look at it. And the bulk of the way you have to look at it is, I'm responsible for everything that I've created. So if I have an employee who's falling behind, it's on me. I either hired the wrong person, I took the right person and put them in the wrong seat. I hired the right person, but then my culture drove them downward rather than upward. But at the end of the day, every one of those statements, the genesis of it and the solution to it is me, the person in the leadership position.
Absolutely. And but even if you hired the wrong person, you taught me this as well. In reality, that's probably because I was, that individual or that business owner was hiring for a skill set, not for the intangibles of what they were looking for within that person.
Yeah.
So, and everything that we've done as our business changed and blossomed and is going insane right now, it was hiring the individual and teaching them the skill set. It was
hire the culture, teach the skill set. Yep. Hire for values.
Yeah, and that's tough when you're a young company. It's tough because you need skill set, and so you say, all right, great, I got this top producer from this company over here. Well, he knew their culture, which wasn't our culture, and it doesn't work. So
it doesn't.
All right,
well, great talk, Ken. Appreciate it. So you want to stay on here and just to do a little wrap up?
Yeah, let me
just let me
figure out how to.